Welcome to End Times Explored. I'm Jerry Rose. Today, best-selling author Rabbi Jonathan Cahn joins me once again. When he was with me recently, there was really so much to discuss that we asked him to stay for one more episode. Jonathan came to worldwide prominence with the release of his first book, The Harbinger. Now, he has written a follow-up, The Harbinger 2, The Return. Jonathan is a prophetic voice to this generation, and he leads Beth Israel, a worship center for Jews and Gentiles just outside of New York City. Jonathan, thanks for taking the time to be with me again. I know you have a busy schedule, and I really appreciate you taking this time.
Oh, my blessing to be with you.
In our last program, we were talking about prophecy and prophetic signs. What are some of the prophetic signs concerning 9/11 that you've not revealed until now? And in fact, I think you're going to be talking about those in Harbinger too.
Yeah, Jerry, when I wrote The Harbinger, there was more that I didn't put in the book than I did. And what's in there is actually just a piece of a bigger mystery that I knew was for another time. So until when the Lord said it was right. So with The Harbinger 2, I open these up in a section called The Unrevealed. Then the other kind of realm of The Harbinger 2 is what's happened since The Harbinger came out. Has the mystery continued? Has the template and the signs of judgment and other harbingers, have they appeared in America? The answer is they have. And the last part is what is happening now and where are we heading and where are we going and how to be prepared. Is it all part of this thing? Is the shaking part of it? And it is. So the first part, exactly what you asked, there is a mystery to something that happened in Washington. You know, in Harbinger 1, I speak of particularly what was New York, but it wasn't just New York. There is a mystery when judgment comes to a nation in the Bible. The powers of that nation are shaken, and not only that, but God says basically He'll bring things back to their foundation. Well, one of the great powers of America is its military power. America became the military superpower of the world after World War II, and has been there ever since. So but when did it begin? It began as America entered that war. You know, we were an isolationist country. We entered the war, and from that we came out of it on the as the military superpower. But the year that we did was 1941, and as we did, there was a building built that was paralleled America's rise to superpower, military superpower. Well, what was the building? It was, of course, the Pentagon. The Pentagon has been the center and the symbol of America's military power around the world since then. Well, so 9/11, when it comes, it returns to, it shakes the power, that which represents American military power. But when was the Pentagon struck? When was the Pentagon begun? When it was begun on a particular day as they broke the ground on the Potomac River. So when was it? The Pentagon was born on 9/11, September 11th. Its birthday is September 11th. That is the beginning of America's rise to superpower. So long before 9/11 was a date of calamity. I mean, well, the mystery of why 9/11, it was the date of America's rising. And there's a prophecy in the Bible, a principle where God says in the day of judgment, I will break down what I have built up. So here the day of the building up became the day of the breaking down. And not only that, the building that the Pentagon replaced, the War Department building, had existed for 60 years. If you take the day that the Pentagon began and add the 60 years, it takes you to September 11th, 2001, to the exact date. And the warning here, a biblical warning, is that, and again, 9/11 was itself a harbinger of things to come. The warning is, America, all your blessings and powers come from God. But if you turn away and you war against God, that power, that great military superpower, is going to crumble. And I'll throw in a parallel one there too, Jerry, and that is this. What's the other great power of America? The great power is its economic power. That began much longer before. It was always linked to New York City. So 9/11 strikes Washington and the Pentagon and strikes New York City. Actually strikes another symbol, which is the World Trade Center, of America's now economic power. Well, when it's always been linked. When did New York City begin? And when did that rise begin? Well, it was when Henry Hudson discovered it. What day? September 11th, 9/11. Same day. Same day. And so all this about 9/11, it was the day, long before we heard about 9/11, it was the day of America's rising. But the warning here is that if America, if you do not come back, if you don't turn back, if you continue to war against your own foundation, the foundation is going to crumble, and all the economic power and prosperity that you've known is going to crumble. So those are just two warnings from 9/11 that are happening, that are applied to really what's happening now.
The COVID-19 pandemic is certainly the most traumatic major event of 2020, but also in the history of America. But it's beyond that. We've seen fires that won't end. In fact, I was seeing yesterday that one of the major fires, the glass fire, is still, after all this time, only 50% contained. More hurricanes than usual, civil unrest like we've not seen in over 60 years, incredible divisiveness in America. Are these things predicted in Scripture?
It's not only the things, they're all happening at once. We've never been shaken like this. So yeah, now I would say this, and as far as predicted in Scripture, I would put it this way. There are mysteries and templates in the Bible that therefore then these templates then pinpoint these things. You know, if we're following it, this is where it goes. On the last program, we spoke about how this template actually pinpointed not only what was going to happen, the template of the Harbinger, but when. It actually pinpoints the year 2020 and actually even speaks about a plague. You know, and for those who don't know, in a nutshell, the template is a strike before the destruction of the nation. Years before, a strike comes on the land. That was our 9/11. And then comes this window of time to come back. And then if it doesn't come back, come shakings. And the template pointed to 2020. But even that, I'll give you from the Harbinger 2, there's probably the largest chapter is called The Plague. And what has happened to America? What has happened with this thing? Well, can plagues be judgments? Well, they clearly can. I mean, you look in the Bible, you can't escape that. From Egypt onward, of course they have been. But also they were prophesied to happen in this 19th year. We told you about last time about Jeremiah's prophecy. Well, that corresponds to 2020 for America, 19 years after 9/11. Well, the thing is now before I say what I'm going to say, because it's going to be very heavy, I'm not saying, number one, that everybody who gets the disease has nothing to do with individual people. You know, it's about a civilization. You know, when judgment came to Israel, the prophets were affected by it just as much as anybody else. But the thing is that it's not that there's just one cause. But here's the thing: when Jeremiah spoke about the plague that was coming in the 19th year and the judgments that would come in the 19th year, he linked it to something that especially invokes the judgment of God. And what was it? It was the blood of the children. When a civilization sheds the blood of its own children, that invokes the judgments of God as nothing else. And it happened to ancient Israel. Well, we are living in this generation. We talk about the last days. I'm not talking about just the younger generation. I'm talking about everybody alive right now. This is the generation of human history that has killed more children, unborn children, than any other in the history of the planet. That's number one. And we're coming to like just the end of those who are alive, or those who began abortion in America 50 years ago. But not only that, there's all sorts of mysteries here. You know, when Jeremiah said the judgment or the destruction will come back to the place where the children's blood were shed. Well, where in America have more children been shed their blood in this? New York. New York is the capital of abortion in America. Where did death come to in this plague more than any other place, even to this day? New York. When was the plague recorded as coming to America? There was a patient in Seattle called Patient Zero. And the next day was headlines all over America that it had come. And next to the headlines was a date. And the date was January 22nd. January 22nd is the day that America legalized the killing of children in this land. And not only that, not only was it the anniversary, but It was the 1 year anniversary. 1 year before that, New York crossed the line again, if you remember. That's when New York in 2019 passed that gruesome law that expanded abortion to the point of birth. And they lit up the tower, that one of the 9 harbingers of the book. They lit up that tower to celebrate it. And 1 year to the day it comes. It's recorded as coming. Let me give you more. Jeremiah, when he made that prophecy about the judgment that was coming because of the children, he said that there's going to be so many people dying that in the place where the children's blood were shed, that they won't be able to handle the burying of it. Well, there were so many people dying in New York, they couldn't handle the burial. And they shipped the bodies unclaimed bodies to an island called Hard Island. Now, Jeremiah, when he gave that prophecy, he's standing by the potter's gate with a potter's jar and speaking over the potter's field. The place where in New York, on that island that they buried the bodies, New York calls it the potter's field. The very place where Jeremiah gave the prophecy of what would happen. And remember when Jeremiah cried out and he said, is there no balm in Gilead? Believers know that verse, but they don't always know the context. He's crying out because of judgment. And he's saying, is there any cure for this judgment, any healing? Because the judgment he's talking about is the judgment for the blood of the children. So he cries out for a balm of Gilead. Well, we've got a plague. And so America's been seeking for a cure, a balm of Gilead for this plague ever since. In the spring, a company came out with what they said was a cure. It was a little cure, and the stock market went up 500 points. It was a big news. And so it was America's balm of Gilead. What was the name of the company? The company that produced this balm was called Gilead. Gilead Sciences, literally. Let me give you one more, and there's so much, but I'm going to give you one more, and because this is from the plague, the chapter in the Harbinger too. One more, and that is, I've talked about in the Oracle about the Jubilee, and the Jubilee is a time of blessing. But if you took something that didn't belong to you, it's a time of retribution. You get whatever you took is taken away in the year of Jubilee. Well, in America began abortion not in 1973, began abortion on demand in 1970. That particularly New York. And New York really opened the doors for abortion on demand in America. Began in 1970. 1970, when is the Jubilee is the 50th year. When is the Jubilee of abortion in America? 2020 is the year. What you took life, will be taken from you. But not only that, but the day, New York voted abortion in 1970 on April 9th and April 10th, 2 votes. When they did the study to find out when was the peak of the plague on New York, came back to New York in 2020, it was April 9th and April 10th, 50 years to the very days.
Your first book talked about 9 harbingers, warning signs of the coming judgment. Can you talk about some of those?
Sure. Yeah, there are 9 signs, and in the last days of Israel, 9 harbingers appear in the land, beginning with a strike on the land. But it's specific. These are specific things. These same 9 harbingers have now appeared in America. And actually, that's how the harbinger began. I'm standing at ground zero and I see the remains of a tree, and something says there's something there. You have to seek this out. And it became this puzzle piece of a mystery. It kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then until I found out that all the 9 signs that appeared in the last days of ancient Israel appeared in America, starting with 9/11. And it centers on a scripture, Isaiah 9:10, where Isaiah records that when the attack came, that initial warning strike, the beginning of judgment, the warning, the people, instead of repenting, they responded in defiance. They said, the bricks have fallen in the attack, but we will build bigger. We're going to build with quarried stone. The sycamore trees have been struck down, but we're going to plant a stronger tree, the cedar or the biblical eris tree. So God, they're telling God, we're not coming back to you. We're gonna rise up stronger without you. Well, that's what happened in 9/11. And on the day after 9/11, the American government gathered on Capitol Hill to present America's response to the calamity. And Tom Daschle, Senate Majority Leader, gives the response. And at the end of his speech, he says, to America, to the world, there is a word from Isaiah that speaks to us now. And then out of his mouth comes the same ancient words that were spoken by the leaders of ancient Israel after their attack, that proclaimed judgment on the nation. So Tom Daschle starts saying the bricks have fallen. He starts saying Isaiah 19 word for word, and he has no idea what he's doing. He has no idea what he's saying, but he is pronouncing judgment. He's saying saying America is going to follow the footsteps of ancient Israel. His last words of the speech are, "This is what we will do." And he's talking about, he's saying we're going to do Isaiah 9:10. He doesn't know what he's saying. But that's exactly what happened. That's one of the 9 harbingers. That's exactly that's exactly what has happened to America. And he speaks about a tree, the sycamore tree that was struck down. Well, that's one of the harbingers. And it was struck down that in 9/11 at ground zero, and he doesn't even know it, but they're finding it that day. He speaks about the replacing of that tree with another biblical tree, and that's exactly what would happen 2 years later. But it's prophetic. I'm going to tell you, Jerry, one of the things one of the 9 harbingers that continued into the harbinger 2, and that is, remember the people said the sycamore was struck down, so actually a sycamore was struck down at ground zero on 9/11. But it says the people will replace it with this other tree. Well, 2 years after that, a tree appears in the sky, coming down on ground zero on the corner to the exact spot where the sycamore was struck down. The people have a ceremony and they plant that tree in the place of the sycamore, just as in Isaiah 9:10. And what is the tree? The tree is a biblical Erez tree, which is the same word that Isaiah uses when he talks. He says they're going to replace this. Well, they do it. But now that happened. But now what happened since? Well, there is a biblical sign of national judgment. See, that tree was representing we're coming back stronger. This is America. We're coming back stronger. So that tree is a symbol of America coming back. But one of the symbols in the Bible, signs of national judgment, the fall of it, is the withering away of a tree. Well, what happened to that harbinger, the tree at ground zero? It began to wither away. This is since the book, since the harbinger. It began to wither, and that's why one of the reasons of the harbinger too is all those things that happened since starts withering away. Symbol of America withering away spiritually, morally. And no matter what they did, they couldn't stop the withering. All the trees around it are blossoming. This tree, the harbinger, is withering away, representing America. And then another sign in the Bible of biblical judgment is the cutting off of the branches. God says, I will break the branch, I will cut it off. Obama comes down to ground zero, and he's to read a scripture linked to 9/11, and he changes the word of the scripture. It's supposed to be a scripture of national blessing. God will break the bow, like the bow and arrow. He'll break the weapon and bring peace. But he changed the word bow to bow. He says God will break the bow. That's not blessing. That's a sign of national judgment. He'll break the branches. Right across the street is that tree. And soon after he says it, they start breaking off the branches of that tree that's withering away. The final sign of the fall of a nation is the fall of that particular tree. You read in the Bible when it talks about the fall of the cedar shall be broken down. Well, the word is Erez tree. That's the tree that's at ground zero. Well, it happened. The Erez tree of ground zero fell. Since I wrote the Harbinger, it was destroyed on a Hebrew holy day at Passover. And another sign of biblical judgment, God says the moon will turn blood red. Well, that night that it fell, that night the moon turned blood red. It was an eclipse of the moon. And the thing is, all these convergences. But here's the thing. That is a sign of the fall of a nation in the Bible. And so if the fall of the sycamore matches up with 9/11, what does the fall of an Erez tree, which is a much stronger tree, much bigger fall, that means something bigger than 9/11 is yet to come.
Wow.
Yeah, there's so much.
You know, we hear a lot of questions, especially in 2020. A lot of people are asking the question, well, are we in the end times? Are these the last days? And when we talk about the last days, you can talk about that in 3 or 4 different terms. You can talk about the calamity in America, or you can talk about the last days of the world, or the return of Jesus Christ. How do you correlate those with what's going on today? And how close do you feel, Jonathan, that we may be to the return of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, and you're right, Jerry. There's a few ways of talking about the end times. I mean, at one point the apostles speak about the end times, as an age. But then we know the last days. There's certain things that have to happen. The key sign, of course, is Israel coming back. So we clearly are there. That's the age part. But then we also have, the fall. There shall be a great apostasy. Well, we're witnessing it now. That you are witnessing that in America and the world. I believe that one of the things, and we touched on this once, and that is that America being in this, the American age has got to end for the last events to happen. We talk, you see nations rising in the end times. You see prophecies, you see revelation, but it doesn't specifically say America. So that means that absence is in a sense a prophecy itself. And so I believe that what that means is that, if America kept, following God, well, I believe America would continue to be blessed. So the fact that America is falling away that in itself is a sign, because I believe this is leading to the end of the American age. And many of these signs, from the Harbinger to the Harbinger 2 is about the ending of the American age. And so when that happens, that unleashes everything else that the Bible speaks about.
One other question about this turning away, the abandonment. In 2016, at the Democratic National Convention, there was a vote about God and the platform. The Democratic leadership knew how disastrous it would be if they voted God out of the Democratic Party. And it took 3 votes to get to a vote to include God, and it was booed at the Democratic National Convention. Since that time, it appears to me that there's been an acceleration of godlessness, of moving away from God, even to the point of the arrogance of making a decision, of coming to a conclusion that we have the right as human beings to decide what gender is, which is a total abandonment of anything having to do with God. And then recently, we even saw an acceleration of that with liberals who once again have declared they want nothing to do with God in their public policy. How does that fit into the Harbinger?
Totally. It totally fits in. What happened in the last days of ancient Israel after that attack is, instead of coming back to God, and these are, when you look at all the 9 harbingers, they're all linked to this verse, which is a verse of defiance. Instead of coming back, they accelerated in their calling evil good and good evil and driving God out until destruction came upon them and it was gone. And that's exactly what we have seen. That's the scary thing. What we have seen since 9/11. I'll give you an example of what you alluded to, this realm that I opened up in the Harbinger too, because this came after the Harbinger. And that is, there was a day in the history of Israel when the walls that protected that civilization or protected Jerusalem were broken. The defensive protective walls were broken by the enemy. They were breached. And once that happened, well, judgment was going to come. The Babylonians breached the walls. So that day was called the 9th of Tammuz. That Tammuz is the month. 9th of Tammuz. That became a day of calamity and judgment and mourning and, in the Jewish people history. Well, here's the thing. A few years ago, after the Harbinger came out, America decided to strike down marriage as we know it, marriage as the Bible defines it, and it was June 26, 2015, but on the Bible's calendar, it was not. Bible's calendar, that striking down happened on the 9th of Tammuz, the day when the walls are struck down, the day when the hedge that protects the civilization is struck down. And so here you have marriage, a hedge struck down. So yeah, we are following that. And there is another Harbinger that happened after the Harbinger that links to what you said is, last days of Israel, they started putting up images of gods all over, idols, gods. Well, America actually did that. They actually, it appeared in New York City. It had to be the most colossal image of a false god on the planet. They projected it onto the Empire State Building. It was the god Kali, which is the god of darkness. and they use light to create the God of darkness. Well, God says, woe to those who call evil good and put light for darkness. And actually, the very day that they put it up was the day that on the biblical calendar, a word was appointed. They're opening it up all over the world, all over New York City. They're opening the scrolls, and the word was God saying, do not make an image of a God. It will lead to your destruction. So yeah, we are following that. And that's, Jerry, that is why I've never felt, I felt such urgency to write a book that I held off on writing as the Harbinger 2, because we are at that point. Absolutely correct.
Where do you feel, Jonathan, that as believers, we go from here?
I believe on one hand, we need to pray as never before. You know, there in the Harbinger 2, there is the last section also has hope and what do we need to do to stand in. And it talks also how God actually turned around America twice before, you know, based on his people. But whether that's going to happen, that's another thing. I see great shaking. I see shakings continuing and more shakings, but I see that God can bring revival in it. We have to be the people who become like Elijah, who become like, you know, get the grays out of your life. Whatever is not of God, the time is now, not tomorrow. Whatever you have to get into your life that God is calling, the time is not tomorrow, the time is now. Gray Christianity is going to be disappearing. You're either light or darkness. Choose this day whom you will serve. You know, if Baal is God, serve him, you know, and go to hell. But if the Lord is God, serve him and he will lift you up. This is the day. These are the days that either make or break. And those who will stand for God, if you will stand for God uncompromised, you will become great in the Lord. And these could be our greatest hour. We have to shine the light now. This is exactly what, listen, we're heading to an end time, the last day scenario where it's light and dark. We're watching it in America, but it's the whole world. But this could be our greatest hour for those who will rise to it. That's why I'm getting the message. That's why I know I have to get this message out. This is a call from God.
So basically what we're saying is it's time for believers to get serious about their faith, to stand for biblical truth, yes, regardless of what that, yes, means, and to become what God has called us to be. Yes. And that's a light to our generation, yes, to shine in the darkness.
For such a time as this.
Yeah, and the darker the darkness, the more important it is, and the greater the effect of the light.
Yes.
Jonathan, again, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to also say again, God bless you for your courage and being willing to speak what you feel God has given to you in terms of your prophetic ministry. And thank you again for joining us. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you. My blessing, Jerry.
Also, I would like to thank you, our audience, for joining us. To get a copy of the Harbinger 2, go to harbingerreturns.com or to your favorite online retailer. And to watch these programs again, you can find them on YouTube by searching under the Total Living Network. Thanks again for joining us. God bless you. We'll see you on our next important program. God bless you.